social media is changing how we do campaigns. For one, campaigns are getting less expensive, not because candidates are more have more consciousness in spending their money, but because corporate donations are now outlawed. So there is a limited amount of money parties can spend with every single campaign they have. So, I mean, they cannot allocate a infinite amount of money for the presidential candidate. So they are having they're working on a tighter budget, but also because of how people consume information on social media. Do you think that they went to places where they knew they would have a lot of supporters in order to have those great clips to share on WhatsApp, to share on Twitter, on Facebook, and on Telegram?
Yeah, in that sense, that's exactly it. But there's also a difference in style, because President Bolsonaro already has a lot of that expertise from the previous election. He's more modern than former President Lula in the sense of using social media and appealing to people on those platforms. And former President Lula does what we call old style campaigning, which is big rallies, a lot of politicians on the podium speaking about things that people sometimes don't want to hear, but he wants the political system to see who's working with him.
Like what?
Well, I'll give you something that is from previous campaigns, but that's a tool the former president often uses. For example, the former governor and mayor of São Paulo, Paulo Maluf, is seen as a conservative, and not he is a conservative, but he was also an ally of the Workers' Party in many elections. But he could not go on stage himself and call people to vote for Lula. He just couldn't do it. But he wanted the political system to know that he was endorsing a different way. So he used to send this singer, Agnaldo Timóteo, who's very charismatic, died of COVID a couple of years ago. And everyone understood that with Agnaldo Timóteo, a close friend of Maluf's, on stage, there was also Paulo Maluf supporting his bid. And Lula did this time something like bringing candidates for gubernatorial races like Alexandre Calil in Minas Gerais, not only because of their personal connection, but they wanted to show that the PSD party, a centrist party that is very likely going to elect a lot of folks.
It's a party that is not in the center, not in the right, and not in
no position. It's
according to its own chairman.
It's forward thinking, of course. But he wanted to show with the support to the Calil candidacy to the governorship in Minas Gerais. And the same thing in Bahia.
Which is the second biggest state in the country in terms of population and of voter base.
And he also wanted to do that in Bahia with a close ally, Otto Alencar, running for the Senate with the support of the Workers' Party. He wanted to show that the PSD party would very likely be part of his government. So he does that very often. And Bolsonaro does politics in a totally different way, not only because he didn't manage to bring as many parties to his bid, but also because he wanted to continue to be seen as an outsider, hence why he did this, we call them motociatas, but it's just a stroll with a lot of motorcycles. It's very cheap, I suppose. I mean, despite the price of gas, it's cheaper than holding a rally for 10,000 people. And that worked for President Bolsonaro to galvanize his supporters as well. So we're looking at two very different campaigns, but aimed at the same thing, bringing hardcore supporters to energize people and make moderates think, well, which one is the one I hate the least? And that's been the case for many of them.
And so if you would have to single out one moment or one place that you visited that is a pro-Bolsonaro place, what would you single out? I mean, what did you see? What did you hear that really struck with you in terms of what Jair Bolsonaro represents to his voters and about his strategy to try to convince a larger part of Brazilians to give him 4 more years in office?
Well, if you look at the things he does in Rio, of course, it's very popular. If you go to his home city of Eldorado in the south of São Paulo state, you're going to see a lot of things that remind you that he has a family, he has friends. But if you go to Barretos, where they have the biggest rodeo in Latin America, you see something different from what is talked by his opponents, that Bolsonaro supporters are full of hatred, that they don't like minorities. It's a different vibe. If you go to a place like Barretos, people vote for Bolsonaro because he's been there for a long time, and because they feel identification with values, Christian values too, but with the values of the countryside. They think, well, this is a guy who can ride ride a horse like I can. He can talk to me in a language I understand. He's not talking about these progressive agendas that I really don't see interfering in my day-to-day life. So in Barretos, when I think it was the most presidential moment I witnessed from Bolsonaro during the campaign, was he was there in a place where 80% of the population voted for him 4 years ago. He was welcomed as a hero by a lot of people. And when he was on his horse, just taking his stroll, and his campaign ad, "The Captain of the People," was playing out loud, you could see people were really emotional about it. It wasn't as if they were upset with the Workers' Party, so they chose him. It wasn't
They
because
were for Bolsonaro.
they were for Bolsonaro. That's different from people that said, well, they're just anti-Workers' Party. That's different. They identify themselves with him, and I think that's the kind of connection that will be not lost for him, regardless of what happens in this election.